Before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to remind those healthcare executives out there that are from small and rural healthcare organizations that Capstone provides complimentary consultations. As you may know, we help small and rural healthcare organizations to be the provider and employer of choice to keep care local and margins strong. Go to capstoneleadership.net and you can fill out the contact form there or actually self-schedule a day and time that works for you. We'd love to partner with you in executing a winning strategy.
They've made these huge investments in that technology, using it at just the kind of surface level. There's a lot of reasons why, but to really understand the assets you already have can encourage us, because the message is always, well, rural hospitals are resource short and we don't have this, we don't have that. But imagine when we view it like a spirit of plenty.
Welcome to Culture Change RX, the podcast for healthcare professionals that are committed to creating a thriving workplace culture, improving the experiences of employees and patients, and ultimately unlocking their organization's next level of potential. I'm Sue Tetzlaff, your host and co-founder of Capstone Leadership Solutions. Join me and my insightful guests each week as we share actionable insights for navigating the crucial people side of the business of healthcare. Subscribe now for a weekly dose of Culture Change RX. Now let's dive into this week's conversation where culture change takes center stage.
So glad you're here for another episode of Culture Change RX. Today I have a guest in the studio, and it's a guest that's familiar to us here on the podcast and familiar to a lot of the folks that we work with in healthcare transformation, and that's Doug Morse. And I'm going to let him introduce himself, give a little background about who he is, what he's been up to, and then we're going to jump into a conversation today, really that reflects lots of conversations we've been having recently with healthcare CEOs and executive teams around certainty and clarity and fun stuff like that. Welcome, Doug.
Great to be here. A longtime rural hospital CEO, and I remember those evenings where it seemed like issues were coming from all directions. The days and weeks flew by, often very hard to know what to do and in what order to do it. So I spend my days working with rural hospitals, CEO boards, and middle managers, navigating and finding ways to sort through that to make forward progress in very, very interesting, challenging times.
Yes. And, you've been in this business for a while, as have I, Doug. And, it's always been like that, right? I think we are in an industry, and in particular, the rural aspect of this industry of healthcare, where you can kind of always expect that there's always going to be some challenge, whether they're internal, external, or both. And maybe that's what pulls us to it. I don't know. I think those of us that love to lead in this environment, I think maybe this is part of what we love about it, is the challenge of it and the mission of it, for sure. So some folks may know this, but we met about a couple of years ago, and you have your company, Doug, where you've been doing a lot of work with boards and executive teams, helping them set that direction and agree on that direction for their organization of what's next for them. And we met, and it was just a nice marriage of our work, you to plan, our company to help execute. And so we've been doing a lot of things like these podcast episodes, webinars, and we have another webinar coming up. It's going to be in December, and it's titled The Turning Point, Leading Your Hospital Out of Uncertainty and Into Its Defining Future. And that's on December 4th from noon to 1 Eastern time. So I want to put a plug in for that. We'll make sure there's a link in the show notes, but we don't want to cover what we're going to cover at the webinar today. And plus, we're not 100% prepared for that yet anyway, because it's not till December. But we have some time today on the podcast to really talk about the current state of the industry and how organizations, maybe some guidance for organizations that are trying to decide what to do next. So with that introduction, Doug, I know you've been talking to some people recently, and there was an aha moment for you, and I think that's going to shape our conversation today. So I'll turn it over to you to kind of bring some context to that.
Yeah, it really goes to, for our listeners and people listening, does this sound familiar? To-do lists, that are 3 and 4 pages long, single spaced, and demands from all directions, changes from the environment. As you mentioned, Sue, those are things that have gone on for years. And in fact, it's what attracts talent, like all the listeners who are listening, to want to do that to serve the communities. The thing that we've really been working a lot on, that is you and I, and the efforts that we do, is to think about in that environment with so many things happening, what are we to do? How are we to even know what potential steps to take? And how are we to decide? And what then do we do to implement? And how do we know if it's working? That whole idea of trying to decide so that we know, so that we can decide and we can implement, is really the nature of the work we do. It can lead to sleepless nights for leaders. I think you and I both live that. And really what we've been talking about a lot is how we weave this together to give leaders tools to know, out of the whole universe of possible actions, how do we know it's available? And a lot of the work we've done, and you mentioned an aha moment, it really boils down to this continued focus on, how we define growth. Growth does not have to be new buildings, new bricks and mortar, new sites. Optimizing what we're currently doing can help us really focus our efforts and use resources that we already have. So one of the things that is such a nice complement of the work that Capstone does, that I do, and as we continue to join our efforts, is helping leaders and CEOs work through that process, have a straightforward journey. What can we do? And how do we decide? And as you and I know, we've spent decades honing the tools and processes that help get us there.
Mm-hmm.
Much of it, honestly, is related to doing more with what we already have, unearthing opportunities with what we have in our communities, and not having to add one more thing. Wouldn't you agree, in the work you've done also, it's adding one more thing that gets us to these to-do lists that are outrageously long that we can't keep up with. That's what you've been seeing as well also, right?
Oh, yeah. And I see it, like I said, some of this is, we've seen it for decades, right? It's not new. It's just maybe a different shade or flavor of it. It's kind of just on repeat. But as you were saying that, Doug, what it reminds me of is when organizations, let's say they have these core service lines that a community hospital might have, right? You can think about what those core services lines are that our communities will count on us to have as a community hospital to serve them. Emergency department, our ancillaries, lab, x-ray, et cetera. But if you take each one of those and you get it to average volumes, average market share, average, quality and service, and you just kind of make them all you get them to that average. And then you say, oh, let's add this specialty service. And then you get that to average market share, average quality, average, patient experience, et cetera. And then you add another one. Let's get another one and another one. And if we're always just keep bringing them to that point of average and not optimizing them, to your point, now we've got a whole bunch, a broad spectrum of things that are all just about the same, if you were to rank them in their volume, market share, financial performance, or whatever. And now, because there's so many of them, we've added operational complexity. We've got to keep them all going, right? They've all got to be managed, versus taking those core things, optimizing them, making them great. Then if we add the next thing, we're going to make it great before we add the next thing, or it's going to be on that pathway, or at least trajectory, because that's what we're known for. Then it doesn't seem so daunting, because everything you've got under your roof, or even if it's down the road, but it's part of your system, is that it is high functioning and it's been optimized. And so we get it to average and then move on to the next thing. We get it to average and move on to the next thing. And pretty soon we've just got so much to manage, and it's so average or maybe even underperforming that our to-do lists just get longer and longer and longer as our service lines kind of explode in that kind of mannerism. And I was an executive in an organization where we did that for a good 10 plus years. And then we changed our ways. and started doing it differently. But to your point, you have to know what the options are. They're both options. And there's
Right.
many in between or other than that. But then you have to decide, do we want that to be how we do it, or do we want to do it differently? So that's the
Absolutely.
planning part, is to make an intelligent decision about what are the options and then deciding which one to go with.
Well, and here's an indicator. If you're listening right now, one thing you might try in your work setting is walk around to some of the other folks and say, what's our priority? And if you talk to 10 people, more than likely you're going to get 10 different answers, even in our rural facilities. So our thesis here is exactly what you're referring to. Growth could be defined as going from average, 75th percentile or whatever, to 80 or 90, because that accomplishes many of the things we want, the economic performance and the other things. So it's really encouraging people to kind of take that action step, see what people say is your priority, or take a look at your own to-do list. Again, if it's 20, 30 things long at the top levels, have the honest assessment. Are we really selecting the things with most impact, or are we winding them up and then doing our best to run every day, keeping things spinning? Our
Mm-hmm.
approach to rural hospital transformation, ours meaning collectively yours and mine together, is about more of the fundamental improvement and optimizing and picking the 3 or 4 things that will really make a difference, because that's what encourages people and creates energy. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
helps
Mm-hmm.
growth. One other example I'd like to quickly toss in, I was recently working with a CEO, and we launched a primary care clinic in that arena. But the strategic plan pretty much said, launch the primary care clinic. And then there was this element that it was done. But the issue, of course, is we haven't done everything we can to optimize patient flows and all of the things that go with it. So at the senior levels, for people who are listening, we can begin to ask ourselves, what's the word optimize really mean? Are
Mm-hmm.
we choosing the high impact activities? Are we getting the right things done, or just a lot done? And I
Yeah.
think that's our thesis for how best to take on any environment. All the changes that are going on, the way to handle it is knowing what's out there and deciding what to work on, the few things that will pull the cart furthest in that direction. And that's
Mm-hmm.
really the work we're
Yeah.
doing, and seeing CEOs energized by that, as well as
Yeah.
other leaders.
I think, to your point about like knowing what the options are and then deciding which ones to go with, part of the challenge with that for any healthcare executive and board that's making those decisions at the most, macro, long term, big picture level is there just are so many options, right? There's so many ways. Let's say we want to secure the mission in the future of our organization, and there's just so many options we could consider to be able to do that, and being able to come together to make a decision. So, for example, are we even an improvement initiative? Like, are we going to go millimeters in many directions to make all of these improvements that are just incremental or small? Or are we going to go all in on one or two that are huge, and we're going to have huge sweeping improvements there? And I mean, what my experience now, 30 plus years in, and now through our work in Capstone, in the last 14 years with dozens of organizations, is when we go big on those few most important things, it's amazing how many things do get better. Like, we might be really just narrowed in on a few things, but because we make such huge improvements or movements in those few things, the ripple effect is tremendous. I can just like point to examples of data where one data point moved not just incrementally in a year, but huge. And then 7 other metrics that were important, but we didn't pick them, they got better anyway because there was just this ripple of impact. And so a lot of organizations, it's a choice. How are we going to approach it? And there's a lot of lessons that some have learned that others could take, guidance from, as examples of, hey, that's a choice I hadn't thought of, but look, it worked for them and it worked for them and it worked for them. And I think that's what our position and our companies have allowed us to do, is not see what happens in one hospital, but see what happens across many that are very similar in rural health.
People might wonder exactly to that point, and this idea of how really do we decide? And here's another kind of reflection challenge I'll offer for a listener or a viewer right now of our podcast, which is, as you think about initiatives, how easy it is to add one more thing to the list. Either someone locally is promoting it, or you're concerned that you don't want to say no to this, and so what happens is there's this strong tendency to add one more thing to the list. We go through a very specific process, which here'd be the challenge for listeners and viewers, to not only take the initiative and consider what good it can do for the mission, but factor in the amount of effort and resources required in order to make it really work. We're really good at the first part. Yep, we can make a case for the mission. We can make a case that's good for the community. But when we put a little math to it, meaning, let's take the top part as all the value, but let's put as a denominator the amount of effort. Then you can start to compare initiatives or projects, because you'll find some very valuable mission-oriented projects are taking a tremendous amount of effort.
Huge.
And where does this show? Financial results and engagement, because our colleagues know they're putting in tons of work, but maybe only making those tiny inch gains.
Yeah.
So another reflection question for people listening to be more active is think about your own institution. Are you factoring in the amount of effort, resources, time, heartburn, nights? And when you know that, once you kind of get a sense of what's giving you your most high impact. And one other thing, if anybody's listening right now and wants to try this just informally on a conversation or Zoom, get a hold of us. We'll walk you through the process. In my career, it took a while to hone this, and it was eye-opening. It's amazing to think about projects from the standpoint of actual resource to value question, because they're all good projects.
Yeah.
The question is, are they high impact with what we're trying to do?
Yeah.
So there's a tool that does it. And if people are interested, let us know.
Yeah.
Give some thoughts on how that's working in your institution. Or can some of these tools be helpful to get control over some of these to-do lists? It really helps you just what to work on, the right things, not just a lot of things.
Yeah. So if we're so focused on this new shiny thing that's going to take a ton of effort and a ton of resources, it might be at the opportunity cost or expense of that our current core services like lab, x-ray, ER, inpatient surgery, that they just kind of stagnate and diminish versus getting built up and optimized, to your point. And so I think about that too, especially organizations that are financially challenged. We always say the math on that is increase revenue, decrease expenses, or both. That's kind of the math to turn that around. And so there's lots of answers to that, right? There's lots of, you got to know what your options are, and then you have to decide which one to do. But let's say we had to add $2 million of new revenue next year. In my view, I would rather take my core services that already exist. I've already got to have those available to my community. They just are core services that have to be there in my community hospital. And I would rather add $2 million more in revenue there than stand up a new service line that's going to take me 2-3 years to stand up to get to $2 million of you know what I mean? Because taking my off of my core services to do that, those might get diminished. Those might go backwards. Those might fall apart. And we need those core services. So it would be way easier, probably less effort and resources to take what we already have and optimize it for revenue, for, efficiencies, for quality, for service, for all of those things, than to stand up something new and take our eye off our core things. Like I'm just sitting here right now thinking out loud into this microphone, talking to you about, know my options and decide what to do. And I lean in that direction often when I have my strategist hat on.
We offer up a conversation for people to think about. One, people like to learn new concepts. So why not work with your senior team and start really digging into what does the word growth mean for your institution? Does it mean new service, new geography, new bricks and mortar? Because that's the traditional, I'll offer, easier way to think about it. and frankly, most risky way. Because just think, to go set up a clinic somewhere else, for example, because you want to attract market share, that means you're going to get that from someone else. Well, they're not necessarily going to give that up easily. So again, a potential senior team conversation and some learning. What is growth? And secondly, what does the word optimize mean? Are we okay staying at that average level that you discussed? Can we go on and take some of these more expensive propositions? Or do we everything we can to move from 75, 80, 85, 90, 95? That's where the gains come from. And most of my work the last year or two have been with people who are beginning to see there's a lot to be gained from optimizing. But frankly, it requires a conversation with the board, senior team. What do those words even mean? Because growth often needs to be viewed as something you can see, right? A new clinic, a new expansion, a new change. It might mean that.
It might, for sure.
Yeah, it very well could.
Yeah.
But why not start first with the things we've already invested in? Another one I've seen recently in the last 4 or 5 months is, frankly, use of the electronic EHR or ERM, whatever you want to call it. I'm seeing a lot of polls, and the people I talk to, they've made these huge investments in that technology, using it at just the kind of surface level. There's a lot of reasons why, but to really understand the assets you already have can encourage us, because the message is always, well, rural hospitals are resource short and we don't have this, we don't have that. But imagine when we view it like a spirit of plenty. Imagine if we use the things we already have more fully. That's our approach as we help people kind of know and decide and implement, and utilizing the human resources through the team structures that you do and the goal cycles. Using the assets we currently have. That's the part that makes it exciting and encouraging, because there's so much opportunity out there.
Yeah, there's so much opportunity. But to your point, Doug, what you're speaking to is there's existing capacity. There's within the EHR, there's existing capacity to use it for more efficiency, for better care, for a better patient experience and employee experience, even in our teams. Like, a lot of times when we come into an organization and, we're there to help them execute strategies that, especially around the area of being the best place to work, the best place for patients to receive care. And a lot of times CEOs or executive teams will say, well, that means we're going to have to add people, we're going to have to add bodies, we're going to have to add, all sorts of things to make that happen. And actually, I'm like, you already have everything you need, I'm sure, in-house. You have capacity, you have the ability to already do this. In fact, you might have way more capacity in workforce than you even need to make this happen. We don't come in saying you got to add more nursing staff yet, to add more clinical staff to get these kind of quality and patient excellence kind of outcomes. You have to optimize, you have to maximize what you already have for the very best result. And we have a lot of that capacity already existing, that technology, the people, and even the heart for it. I think rural healthcare, it just needs to be harnessed. It needs to be put in play, right? Like, they want it maybe, and they just haven't been organized. They haven't figured out the plan and the pathway there. And once they know that there's certain options around that, they decide they're going to do it, then they have some systems and methods for being able to implement it. We found that it's almost, I hate to say it, Doug, and actually I had a CEO say it to me this last couple of weeks, so I'm going to use his words. He goes, dare I say, it even was kind of easy. He goes, this was the first year ever that we hit all of our goals, and we set them bigger than we ever had before. And dare I say, it actually was kind of easy. And it was only because they went through a different process to know what their options were, decide which was the best one, have that, clarity and that plan laid out before them. They had a great structure laid out before them for implementation. And dare he say, it was actually easy to hit all of those goals, right?
No
Yeah.
question. It's a matter of what I found too in my career and even in this work. There are so many other things that get in the way of keeping the main thing the main thing.
Yeah.
And most of us got into this work because we know the main thing, but then we get distracted by all these other things or pulled away. So when we bring processes and kind of proven methods to get us back to the main thing, that ultimately is getting the results and lighting the fires and touching the passions of people who work there. Because ultimately that's why people got into this line of work. And so it's the degree we can sort through and get us back to the main thing. And then frankly, that's why they use the word easy. Makes sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. Yeah. Because, when you have clarity around what you're trying to achieve and you've got clarity around what are the systems and the pathways that are going to get us there, then it's really, it's like following a recipe almost. It's not cookie cutter, but at least you're not making it up all the way around, right? And we've taken away that confusion that slows you down, that lack of clarity and that lack of certainty. That really trips us up and slows us down when we stop and second guess ourselves all along the way in something as important as the, community asset of its local healthcare system. So, yeah. Oh, we could talk about this all day, couldn't we, Doug? This is something that we could talk about all day is clarity around strategies and execution systems.
So if you're one of the leaders right now, again, looking for an action item off the podcast, I'd offer for you to think about 4 things. 1, for you and your organization, do you really know what options are out there for you? 2, do you have a good way to decide deliberately what has the most impact? 3, is there clarity on how you'll implement what you come up with? And 4, are you comfortable with your system so you can verify that things are working the way you want them to? Those 4 questions are really the heart of the work. We're seeing the most gains through your work and my work. And so if you're listening right now, it might be worth some self-reflection. And if you want some conversation, give one of us a call. We'd be happy to talk to you about it.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of the favorite things we get to do is to get on the phone with CEOs and executives from small and rural healthcare organizations to talk about the options and that are out there for them. Like you mentioned, do they know? Do they have a way to decide? Do they have a way to implement? Do they have a way to verify that it's working and to adjust if it's not? So our upcoming webinar, The Turning Point, Leading Your Hospital Out of Uncertainty and Into Its Defining Future, December 4th from noon to 1 Eastern time. So you can learn more about the process of gaining clarity on strategy, gaining certainty in execution. And we're happy to bring more information on that in December or on a call sooner for sure if you need it sooner rather than later. So thank you, Doug, for your wisdom and your sharing of that with our audience.
Thank you.
Your many years of experience and your current contributions to our industry are very much appreciated. And I'm really just delighted to be in your circle here and again here with you today. So thanks, Doug. And we'll put the link for our upcoming webinar. And for those of you that are new to the podcast, thanks for listening.
Thanks for tuning in to Culture Change RX. If you found value in today's episode and you are a believer in fostering change in healthcare, join us in making a difference. Follow, rate, and review our podcast on your favorite platform. Share it with colleagues and your network. Together, we can make a lasting impact. Until next week, keep inspiring positive change.